Hi guys, hope you're all well. Welcome back to the channel. I just thought I'd do a little bit of a video today to clear a few things up. I get tons and tons of questions on my channel all around radio range, how far will this radio go, how far will that radio go. I've just bought one of these Bofengs, how far will it go, what's the range on this radio, why am I not getting out on this radio, and there's all sorts of reasons why people don't get the results that they want or what they think they're going to get on radio. So I just wanted to go through a few of them today and show you a few sort of reasons why that is. Now, I'm filming in a churchyard, as you've probably seen, a bit of a bizarre place to film, but it's the only place I can actually get some peace and quiet without being interrupted. It's local as well. So yeah, I'm going to run through just different reasons why, what can affect a radio's range, and it's based on my knowledge and my experience. So if I get anything wrong, just drop me a comment in the box below. I've made a few notes on this pad here, so I think everything I've got is right, but it's all down to personal experience as well. So you may have different results to me, you may have different opinions to me, and different experiences to me. So I just want to go over some top line really, and discuss. I've got some radios to show here, some different antennas. So yeah, let's get started. Okay, so terrain is one of the major factors that can change how a radio works, the sort of range you're going to get from a radio. So you can get shadow from terrain. So if you've got hills, they can create shadows where sort of RF black spots where radio won't penetrate through that shadow, i.e. if something's just behind a hill and you're down below and there's a lump of earth between you and the other radio, you're not going to get through that lump of earth. Also, hills can create reflections as well, so your signal can bounce straight back off, so what the signal that's coming out of the antenna isn't all going to that one place, a lot of it is bouncing back. Same goes for buildings. You can get shadow for buildings as well. So i.e. this church behind me, if I'm talking to someone who's on the other side of this church, through the building, the signal isn't going to penetrate that building all the way. Now, that's a stone building, so it would do an okay job of getting through. If that was a metal frame building, it wouldn't get through very well at all. Metal frame buildings are a nightmare for radio. That's one thing, and attenuation from buildings as well, so only half the signal getting through, or a limited amount of the signal getting through. Line of sight is a major thing that people don't always get. Radio like on UHF and VHF, FM is line of sight, and so that means that there's a clear enough path between the two antennas on the two radios. Now, with the curvature of the earth, line of sight is around 3 to 4 miles, so if you've got a radio on the ground and a radio on the ground 4 miles away, there is going to be a slight curvature of the earth which will block the signal between those two antennas. Now, if you stood up 6 foot tall, like I am, just nearly 6 foot, and the other person stood up 6 foot tall, the signal will travel a little bit further because you're above the curvature of the earth, so the horizon line is further because you stood up. So that's another thing. So the signals travel in a straight line, so they come out the radio, eventually they're going to hit the curvature of the earth, and that will also affect range. So yeah, when it comes to terrain with radio, height is might. The higher you are, the better results you're going to get as a rule. So if I'm on one hill, you're on another hill, there's nothing whatsoever in between us, communications are going to be a lot easier. If I'm on a hill and you're down below and there's another hill in between, we're not going to get through. If you're at ground level, I'm at ground level, there's a mountain in between, there's a steel frame building in between, we're not going to get through. So the higher up you go, the better. And indoor and outdoor, when I talk about metal frame buildings, is another key factor which I'll come to in a little while. Conditions is another one. So weather can affect radio signal. So thunder and lightning can really hamper your signal when it comes to these sorts of radios. Rain can affect it, fog can affect it, hot and cold temperatures can make your radio operate in different ways and have different characteristics. So that's another thing to look out for. Conditions is another sort of minor factor that can influence a radio's range. Distance, another one. So there's quite a lot to cover in distance, really. Close doesn't always mean that the radios are going to work well. Like I said, if we're in a steel frame building and you've got two radios operating, they may not be able to talk to each other because of the signal being blocked from the metal frame in that building. You could be really close. I've tried to speak to a friend of mine half a mile away, and he was just behind a small hill. Again, like I said, in terrain, that's going to block the signal completely, and it did. So being close together doesn't always mean that you're going to be able to talk to each other. There are factors that will affect these sorts of things. Close doesn't always mean that they're going to work well, but as a rule, the closer you are, you would generally get better results. That doesn't always go as a rule of thumb. I've had contacts in good conditions on these sorts of radios 60 miles away from someone who's on a hill, and that's where terrain comes into it. So there's loads and loads of different intertwining factors that affect a radio's range. A lot of these radio manufacturers put on the box 11 kilometres, 12 kilometres in an open space. You're not always going to get that, as I say. With distance also comes terrain as well, so those two sort of gel together. Usually, if you're reasonably close, you are going to get decent results, but the further away you get, the more factors come into play, i.e. conditions, i.e. interference, i.e. obstacles, and that's when you start to lose things. But on the other hand, I've managed to open repeaters 70 miles away, 80 miles away from a handheld, and that's because I've been on a hill. That's because the repeater's antenna has been really high up on a mast and has been easy to get to. If the repeater that was 70 miles away had a really low antenna, I may not get into that. So it all varies. When you're talking on a radio, as a rule of thumb, more power equals better range. And I say that loosely. If I'm talking to someone on one of these on 5 watts, and then I go to another radio that's in the car and talk to them on 50 watts, they're probably going to receive me a lot better. That's because there's more power coming out of the antenna. You've got a stronger signal coming out. It's going to pass through obstacles a little bit easier. It's going to travel that little bit further, as a rule. Usually with handhelds, which is what we're covering, we have this sort of radio which transmits around 1 to 2 watts out. You have this one which transmits around 7 watts out. You've got this one that transmits around 5 watts out. Now, between 1 watt and 5 watts, you are going to notice a little bit of a difference. I remember a couple of years back, Bofeng bought out this one, which was the GT3 TP, which is a tri-power radio, and these were all the rage because they transmit 8 watts out on UHF. Now, if you've got the GT3 that transmits 5 watts, and you've got the TP which transmit 8 watts, you're not really going to notice any difference between 5 and 8 watts on these radios. Some people disagree, but a lot of people I've seen on forums, on message boards, on Facebook groups, they get hung up on the 8 watt thing, and it's really it really doesn't make any difference. I've tested these radios a lot, and I've not noticed any better performance from 5 watts to 8 watts whatsoever. So that's one to bear in mind. Just because you see a handheld that's advertised at 8 watts doesn't mean it's going to be any better than the 5 watt version. So bear that in mind. When you're talking big power, sort of 2 watts to 50 watts, you are going to notice an increase. When you're talking 10 watts to 100 watts, you're obviously going to notice an increase usually. But when you're talking, the difference between sort of 1.5 watts and 2 watts and 5 watts and 8 watts, you're not really going to notice any difference whatsoever. A lot of people get hung up on 1 or 2 watts here and then. It really doesn't make any difference. That's one to watch out for. Of course, with the higher watt radios, i.e. the GT3 TP, that's going to get through your battery a lot quicker because it's running a higher power. It may only be a couple of watts extra, and you may not notice any difference in the transmit and receive side of things, but your battery will drain faster than it would on the normal radio because it is using more energy to deliver a higher power transmission. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so the next thing is frequency. Different bands have different characteristics and also different times. Usually you hear a lot of amateurs say 2 meters is better for range. They have a better QSO on 2 meters, and a lot more people use 2 meter simplex because generally, as a rule, operating conditions are better on there. You can get slightly further. 9 times out of 10, if you compare a 70 centimeter frequency and a 2 meter frequency on simplex, you are going to get slightly further, or the receiving station is going to receive you slightly better as a rule on 2 meters. Some of these operate on UHF, some operate on VHF, and some operate on both, and the bands do have different characteristics. So that's something to look out for. The frequency you're operating on, is that the frequency that's right for the intended purpose? Is that the frequency that's right for you? Okay, VHF has a longer wavelength than UHF. So VHF has more penetrating power, and the lower the frequency goes, the longer the wavelength. So shortwave and HF communications are used to get around the world because they have such a long wavelength and they travel further. VHF, so UHF has a shorter wavelength and a more concentrated wavelength, so it doesn't travel quite as far as a rule. And the higher up you go, talking into sort of like microwave territory. Microwaves are very, very short and concentrated wavelength. That's why a lot of microwaves are point to point, because they're such a short, concentrated wavelength. They don't spray everywhere and have sort of like a wide field of projection, whereas a shortwave station would transmit that longer wavelength quite wide, and it'll just go all around the world, bounce off the ionosphere, and that's how they get distance. So as a rule, you get the longer range, the lower frequency you go, the higher you go, the shorter range you get, if that makes sense. Also with a lot of these radios, for example this one, you'll find this antenna is cut for 400 to 480 megahertz. The radio is advertised at transmitting, or can transmit, 400 to 480 megahertz. Now at 400 megahertz and 480 megahertz, these aren't going to be effective at all because this antenna will be most resonant around the 70 centimeters territory, and so will the radio. So you would find a difference in range at 400 megahertz, 433 megahertz, and 480 megahertz. And 433, you'll probably find better results. Some people use these on PMR and do struggle a bit because the antenna isn't as resonant on 446 megahertz as it is on 433 megahertz. So that's another thing, another factor. So a lot of people buy these to use on PMR, and they are better designed for sort of the amateur 70 centimeter band, which is the sort of happy medium. So that covers frequency. Hope that made sense. Okay, the next point is the quality of the radio. You can go out and spend 300 or 400 quid on the latest Motorola, and it will do you reasonably well. That's not to say that these are crap. A lot of people slate Bofeng radios. A lot of people love them. They do have the faults, but so does any radio, and it all depends on the end user and what you want to use it for. But with these radios, you have all sorts of variants. So here I've got the Bofeng 888S, the Bofeng GT1, and then the BF 888S Plus. Inside they're all a very, very similar radio. They're all reshelled and advertised as new radios, and people automatically think that they're better. This radio, which was released I think in 2016, is no better than the original Bofeng BF 888S. They are the same radio inside. The thing that does trip people up is when you get manufacturers that clone them. So for example here, you've got a proper original Bofeng UV5R. Here you've got a UV5RA, which is actually a counterfeit. So it's not quite as well made as the other ones. The batteries don't fit as well, and the labels are different inside, and they don't operate quite as well. they'll talk to each other, no problem, but I found with this one as an example, this one gets swamped by RF from external sources, where this one isn't as bad. So you know, quality control is another factor. You know, these radios are made, they're mass produced on production lines, very little testing is done. That's why when you get a couple of UV5Rs, they'll all measure different on the power readings, because they're not finely tuned like your more expensive radios, which I don't have. So yeah, quality control and counterfeiting is another thing that affects radios. You know, I've seen people buy these and they can't program them because the software inside isn't that great. I've seen people buy these sorts of radios and they don't get more than a couple of 100 meters out of them, and that's because well, A, because it could be a counterfeit, or B, it could be a quality control issue, i.e. something's not soldered down properly inside, something's missing, something's damaged, something hasn't been tuned or set up properly. So yeah, quality control and counterfeits play a big part when it comes to these radios as well, and it's something to watch out for. You'll see most Bofeng UV5Rs sell for around 22 to 25 quid. If someone's selling them for sort of 15, 16 quid, they're probably counterfeits that have been bought in bulk and they're being sold off cheap. So that's another thing to look out for as well. Just because it's cheap doesn't always mean it's going to be the best one. Just covering some other models of radios, we've got the UV82 here. A lot of people think this is better than the UV5R. I personally do. I think it operates a lot nicer. This one is pretty good when it comes to sensitivity, and it just works a lot better than the UV5R, and I've had better results out of it. You know, other manufacturers sometimes bring out models such as this, which is a GT3 WP, and it's basically a UV82 in a different shell, in sort of like a ruggedized shell, but the insides are the same. So a lot of people see these other models here, which is basically a GT3 in a different shell, and think, wow, that's going to be a better radio. A lot of eBay advertisers sell them saying, you know, brand new 2017 model, you know, better processor, better signal filtering, all these sorts of things. Chances are they're the same radio inside, there's no difference in them. So that's just one to watch out for. I've got loads of these models of radios just because I like them and I collect them. I've never bought them thinking, wow, this is going to be better. You know, you can guarantee next year, well, this year just before Christmas, there'll be other little Bofengs that'll come out. Next year you'll see 2018 models, and they're just these rebadged and reshelled in a different body. As I said earlier, these three radios here all look different, but they are actually the same radio inside. So yeah, that's one to watch out for. Just because they're advertised as a brand new model doesn't mean they're going to be any better. This one here was advertised as the 2016 updated model, and yeah, it did come out in 2016, but it was just a different shell. The radio inside is the same as the normal BF888S. Okay, the next point is antennas. So there's quite a bit to cover on antennas. Firstly, a lot of people upgrade the Bofeng antenna to these Nagoya style antennas. This is an NA771. Now, people think, oh, it's a longer antenna, it's going to get me out more. There really actually isn't much difference between that antenna and the antenna on here, to be honest. So you know, these, a lot of people swear by these. I've tested them quite a lot, and you know, sort of reached the conclusion that they're not actually that much better. You know, if any good at all. I've had some that actually perform worse than the antennas that come with the radios. I've seen these soldered inside with the wrong polarity, so any output power that's coming from the radio is just directed straight back into the radio and can cause damage. So yeah, counterfeiting does go on with antennas as well. There is a lot of fake Nagoyas. You know, if you see these on eBay for £1, it's probably a knockoff. There's plenty of videos on YouTube of how to spot the fakes, but some of them are pretty good. So these antennas, just because they're bigger, for you know, your average person starting out will see this and think, wow, this is going to get me a lot further. It isn't. These you know, aren't actually that much better, and all the other factors that we've discussed come into play, i.e. terrain, weather conditions, that sort of stuff. So that's something to look out for. Some people as well upgrade to these little stubby antennas because they think they look great. The radio's nice and tidy, it fits in the back pocket. These are rubbish. You know, if you want to talk to your mate in the next room, or you know, you're working as security and you're on a door 20 yards away from another door, yeah, they are going to work. But you know, I've seen people on YouTube videos and on forums, you know, wondering why they're not getting out with this, why they can't open the local repeater because they're rubbish. You may as well throw it away. They're no good at all. I think that one was a quid off eBay, and just no good. So don't waste your money on them. A better quality your antenna, you know, the more range you're likely to get. So I always upgrade my antennas off the Bofengs. I don't use any of the Bofeng stock antennas because I don't think they're that great. Some of them are like dummy loads. I always try and look for a decent quality dual band rubber duck off eBay, and it's sort of hit and miss. You know, as you get more experience in radio and start buying different antennas, you'll sort of realise what works for you. When I'm mobile, I use an antenna that's on the car. I don't know if you can see it in the shot, but there's an antenna on the car here. Quite a large mag mount, full. I think it's a quarter wave antenna on the top, and that works really well. You know, I saw a guy on a Facebook group the other day with one of these on the roof of his car attached to his Bofeng. Now this is a Stereo CB antenna. It's cut for 27 megahertz, not for VHF or UHF. So, you know, again, don't look at this and think, wow, that's absolutely huge. That's going to get me out. If it isn't cut for the band you're transmitting on, it isn't going to work very well, and it could damage your radio. You know, so. That's something to look out for when it comes to antennas. The better the antenna, the better the radio is going to be. You can have the best radio in the world. You know, you can buy a 700-800 quid digital dual band Kenwood and bob one of these on it, and it's going to do you no favours. So the more money you spend on your antenna, the better quality antenna you've got, the better you're going to be. Try and go for, you know, the decent brand names that are out there, and obviously counterfeiting is a bit of a gamble. Okay, just a small bit, squelch and filtering. These radios aren't the best when it comes to filtering, i.e. filtering outside noise. I've been on hills where there's transmitter sites and not been able to hear anything on these because they are completely swamped by RF. So if you live near a mobile phone transmitter, if you live near a hilltop transmitter site, if you're in a place that's got loads of Wi-Fi access points, all these things can swamp and overload these radios and cause them not to work. You won't hear a thing on them because the receiver is just completely overloaded with stray RF. The UV5R isn't really that bad when it comes to that, but I find a lot of these cheaper ones are easily swamped. But you know, when I talk about counterfeiting and quality control, some Bofengs don't deal with RF noise very well, others aren't so bad. You know, I can talk on this all day long on my local hill which has got a transmitter site and not be affected. You know, I can use, I think it was this one I tried not long ago, and it was just completely deaf, and that's because it was wiped out by RF. Another bit with that is squelch. So making sure you've got your squelch at the right level. Some people have messaged me saying, can I send you my Bofeng programming file? I can't work out what I've done wrong, but I can't hear anything, and they've got the squelch set right up. So squelch is basically when you turn your radio on, there now the squelch is closed. That noise there is a squelch open. So the lower the squelch, the more you're going to receive. The squelch, if you turn your squelch up, it basically filters out weak signals, so you don't get interference. But like I say, if you have it set too high, you won't hear anything. And I've had a couple of people in the past, they've set the squelch right up, really high, and they can't hear anything at all. So that's another one to look out for. So I've rambled on long enough there. I hope a lot of that made sense to you. In summary, what makes a good radio? How do I get the best range out of my radio? If you use a cheap radio or an expensive radio, there's three things that matter. The first one is antenna. Make sure you've got the right antenna. The second one is height, and the third one is terrain. If you're in a built-up area, you're not going to get out very well. If you're in a low down area, you're not going to get out as well. And if you've got a crap antenna on your radio, you're not going to get out as well. So make sure you've got a good antenna. Make sure there's nothing between you and the other person you're talking to where possible. Make sure you're as high as possible. That is the best thing you can do to get good range out of your radio. Hope all that made sense, guys. And that was a lot of waffle. I'm just basically answering a lot of the questions and comments that I get on my videos. So I hope that made sense to you. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something from it. If I've made any mistakes or didn't explain anything too well, I apologise. I'm just going off what I know and my own experience. So if you've got any constructive feedback, then by all means drop it in the box below. Click the little like button and click the subscribe button as well. That helps me to stay motivated and keep making these videos for YouTube. Click the little bell on the subscribe button as well. You'll get a notification every time I upload something new. Okay, I'll say 7-3, guys. I'll leave that one for now, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers. We'll keep you anyway. You come in useful at some point.